Today I wanted to do something a little bit different. I have in mind kind of a poetry review because I've just finished 2 poetry books recently, but I also have one that's not specifically poetry but feels kind of in the vein of like prose poetry, so I want to throw that one in as well. So it'll be a slight review of all of them, maybe slight discussion of just poetry in general. But anyways, let's hop into it. So the first book that I've got Sylvia Plath's Crossing the Water. I just love Sylvia Plath, and I had been in a mood a while ago, and I got this as part of that mood, and I just recently finished it. So there's that one, and the other one I don't have a physical copy of because it's in my Kindle, but the other poetry book that I wanted to talk about is The Shaping of an Angry Black Woman by Tamara Woods, who is a YouTuber. If you want to go look for it, I can link her stuff down below. And then the final book that I wanted to talk about, that again is more like prose poetry than actual poetry, is The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse. So basically, I just wanted to kind of talk, I guess, about my feelings on poetry in general, what I like with it, why I specifically wanted to do like a Sylvia Plath along with Tamara Woods' Shaping of an Angry Black Woman. So within those, they're both the kind of poetry that I really get very, very into. A lot of heavy imagery and metaphor and so much emotion, even if you don't quite understand what the pictures are trying to tell you sometimes. And so I loved both of these. This wasn't like my favorite Sylvia Plath compilation. It doesn't have my absolute favorite of her poems, but this one actually had several that I remember reading back in the day in like high school and studying for that and stuff, and they were a pretty big shaping of my poetry tastes even back then. So it was fun to kind of revisit some of those poems and find some new favorites as well. And then, yeah, Tamara Woods has a lot of that same writing style, all that emotion, some very powerful imagery, sometimes metaphors and things that I don't know that I'm quite understanding, but that the image of them still really sticks with me. So I do actually have a few poems that I was going to read along with it. And then we'll talk also a little bit about this guy. So let's jump into the readings. Theming-wise, with the poems that I wanted to read, I've picked out Stillborn by Sylvia Plath, and then we'll jump into the Tamara Woods after this. Since I've got Sylvia Plath right here, I'll just kind of show me reading it as we go. So again, this one is Stillborn by Sylvia Plath. These poems do not live. It's a sad diagnosis. They grew their toes and fingers well enough. If they missed out on walking about like people, it wasn't for lack of mother love. Oh, I cannot understand what happened to them. They are proper in shape and number and every part. They sit so nicely in the pickling fluid. They smile and smile and smile and smile at me, and still the lungs won't fill and the heart won't start. They are not pigs, they are not even fish, though they have a piggy and a fishy air. It would be better if they were alive, and that's what they were. But they are dead, and their mother near dead with distraction, and they stupidly stare and do not speak of her. So yeah, this is just one of those poems that I feel such like a visceral connection to. I'm not even a mother at this point, but describing her poem kind of as a child being born and maybe also relating to her experiences as a mother, because I know she was a mom, but I don't know if she had actual stillborns and stuff. It was just such powerful imagery for me. So that's where I am with that one. Tamara Woods that I want to read, I feel like is also, again, kind of in that mothering vein. Again, I don't know quite her life experiences to have brought it to it, but this one's called The Birth of a Soul, and I feel like has a lot of similar themes and evokes a lot of the similar sense, and is probably part of why I loved it. So, since that one's on my Kindle, I'll just put the words up on the screen and read that one aloud. Okay, The Birth of a Soul. I want to expel your wisdom from my insides. Let my abdomen expand to the fullness of your politics. My dormant maternal instinct gears to life with a suddenness, presses the air from my lungs. My inner thighs quiver in anticipation. Mind whispers to use caution, protect myself, but my womb contracts as your voice, whiskey-soaked and $3 packs of cheap cigarettes roughened, penetrates my every orifice, bridging this gap between my stark, lifeless reality, pressing deep with words of alternative universes, elevated consciousness dipped and tinged with crude levity and a frank disregard for my need to keep my senses. As the angels and demons who dance in your head sip from your tongue into my bloodstream, intoxicating me, and my heart races, infusing me with their lusty visions of nirvana, and my mortal soul weeps. My breasts grow heavy and warm with your stylized world, tapping into my ovaries, your rich timbers triggering my eggs, traveling down my fallopian tubes, matriculating as your words move like light beams, wiggling, infusing my womb with you. I feel the spark as your ideas take root deep inside of me, growing, stretching, reaching, taking me to the pinnacle and beyond where sanity lives. And I grow with opinions, your fiery rants, skewed view, and I have to expel them. I grab a pen, clench my teeth, bearing down, pushing beyond my limits, self-imposed boundaries, and I scrawl, grunting, sweating in this damn heat until I birth these words. Through those couple poems now, let me know if you see some of those similar themes or if there was anything in the imagery that really stood out to you or anything like that. But finally, we're going to be talking about the boy, the mole, the fox, and the horse, and just kind of a little bit about like prose poetry. I picked this one up as kind of a recommendation because Murphy Napier, who also has a YouTube channel, and I can also link her down below, she was talking about it and said she loved it so much and wants to read it to her son and is going to kind of revisit it and reread it over and over again and all that kind of a thing. And like looking at the cover, I was like, ooh, it looks really cool. And overall, I think this was a really beautiful book. The philosophy that's kind of discussed in it, which is probably why it feels kind of like prose poetry to me, is really nice, and I feel like it's got some good lessons that it teaches in it, but it was a little hard for me to read too, because if you see like the font that title is in, I think it's the author's own handwriting, and the whole book is written in that. And normally I don't have a ton of problems with writing, but I think maybe because it's kind of like an ink pen style and it's a little bit like cursive and stuff, it was just a little hard for me to read sometimes. And just for me personally, I felt like some of the messages were lost a little bit because I was trying to discern what the letters were versus just being able to enjoy the beautiful lyrical things that he talks about. But to kind of make a point about it, he's making this book as a book about friendship, and it's a boy and a mole who meet, and then they meet a fox, and they grow and learn about fear, and then they meet a horse, and things like that. And so there's just kind of all these little philosophies that go along with friendship, that go along with it, and so it was just really interesting. But I think one of the philosophical things that stood out the most to me was this one here. Is your glass half empty or half full? Asked the mole. I think I'm grateful to have a glass, said the boy. And like, there's all kinds of little thoughts that are just like that. But this one in particular got me, and I was like, oh, that's so good. That's such a different perspective on it. It's not that we have to be like an optimist or a pessimist, but we can just have gratitude for life and things too. And like, what does that mean your philosophy is in comparison to the optimist and the pessimist and all of that? And so it gave me a lot of beautiful things to think about. But I do kind of wish the font was a little easier to read. But that's just me complaining that I had a little trouble reading it, just physically. The words that were said were great. The drawings are great. I love all the artwork. It was just a little hard to read. But yeah, So let me know if you've read any of these books, if you like Sylvia Plath, if you've read any Tamara Woods, if you happen to have read The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse. If you have recommendations of anything that you think might be similar or to my tastes based on what I've kind of talked about in this video, I'd love more recommendations. But I think that's all I've got for now. This is the Umlaut Harper signing out.